Meet the transfers. Kansas Jayhawks edition. Rock Chalk. This is the #1 rated transfer class in the country. We all did our individual rankings for the top 20 transfer classes, and we all had Kansas #1. There was no debate. Everybody consensus agreed. This is the best job any coach, any program did in the transfer portal this summer. It's a 5-man class. We're going to go player by player and give our expectations for each guy. But first, I have some questions for you at the top. Mr. Brian Ralph. Question #1, did Bill Self do what he set out to do when building this transfer class?
By getting our top ranked transfer class.
I think he did.
I think he did. Like he made no bones at the end of last season. Made no bones about the fact that they were not good enough and he was not going to let that happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And then went out and landed what we viewed as the nation's best transfer class unanimously. So I think he did. He added some shooting, added some depth on the wing, added some overall depth that they did not have. I think he did exactly what Kansas needed.
Yep, he got better on the wing, in my opinion, and that's hard to say because as much as people want to shit on Kevin McCullough was really good at basketball when he was playing last year. So for me to feel like they upgraded losing McCullough and Furphy to new players is kind of crazy in hindsight. And then the second thing I really like, which I'll speak more on later in the video, is I feel like he got some guys that may put some pressure on their point guard. And not that DeJuan Harris's job is in question, but I think DeJuan Harris's inconsistency has been a part of Kansas's problems since their last national championship. DeJuan Harris played a huge role on the team that won a national championship, but they have needed him to take a step forward since then. And he still has been too hesitant offensively, even though he is a genius playmaker. That just hasn't fully clicked yet. I'm holding out hope that it can before his Kansas career ends, but there's now some guys that are going to make him take that step forward. Like Zeke Mayo is really good, and Zeke Mayo can play next to DeJuan Harris. But there is a world here where, like, if DeJuan is struggling any given game, now you have some backcourt options that, with all due respect, are not Elmarco Jackson, a true freshman last year, that will be ready for this moment if DeJuan isn't elevating himself.
See, I completely disagree. I think
Really?
these additions were made somewhat with DeJuan Harris in mind. DeJuan Harris is not like what we think of with your typical like 4-year starter. Kansas, he's not Frank Mason. He's not somebody who's like going to be the guy. He is a very good defender, an elite playmaker, and does not want to shoot. But he runs the team incredibly well. So you brought in a bunch of guys who are excellent scorers. And so now Harris can set them up and not worry about having to take 10 shots a game like Kansas probably needed him to last year.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that point. I think even if you don't have a complete black hole like Nick Timberlake or whoever the 5th guy on the floor was for Kansas last year, your point guard has to be a threat. And we can say like his role is not that. He's a threat even when he's just playmaking. Sure, that can work. But like the best case version of DeJuan Harris is basically what Rajon Rondo was for the Celtics teams with Pierce, Allen, and Garnett, right? And I guess you can say like now they have their Pierce, Allen, Garnett. That those are the guys they brought in. I honestly like that roster comp now that we're talking about it. But I still think like the most dangerous version of Kansas includes DeJuan Harris being like a threat to do more than just pass. You've got to make defenses respect him. And that's all I mean by there's pressure on him is because in the past, I felt like DeJuan could come in, not shoot the ball and be absolutely terrified and just not care and know that, oh, well, I'm still playing 36 minutes. Now it's like, I got to play good today, at least.
I got you. Yeah, there is a line between who he was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When he like was terrified of shooting, who he was last year where Kansas needed him to shoot 10 times a game.
Yeah.
I don't think either one is who Kansas needs. They need somebody who's going to shoot in spots. I think in both the Final Four and national championship games back in 2022, which I guess would be 3 years ago at the end of the season. Holy cow. He made, I think, like 2 threes in each of those games. Yeah. It was like 2 of 3 from 3. And then I'm probably off on those numbers. That's what it felt like being there. Was that he took a couple and made a couple and made defenses respect him. That's what you need from him. But the pressure is off for him to try and shoot 10 times and average 10 points per game. Yeah, because he's not that guy, but he does need to contribute more than, 2 shots a game. And you're right on that.
I've decided I'm all the way in on this if I wasn't already because yeah, they got guys that help Dewan while also putting pressure on Dewan. I love that. Okay, the second question: what could they have done better with this transfer class? How could the number one class have been even better?
Uh, I don't think it can really. I think they did exactly what they needed to do based on who was available, unless you got, all of the top 4 or 5 guys.
I have a question, if not an answer to this, but I want your
Okay.
opinion on it. Do you like this class more if Riley Kugel is still in it
No.
because of locker room concerns?
Not necessarily because of locker room concerns, but I think what Shaquille Moore, who is essentially Riley Kugel's replacement, is going to bring fits his role. And I think Kugel was probably more talented, but may have struggled to fill that role as well as I think Shaquille Moore is going to.
Okay.
It
Okay.
basically means Zeke Mayo is going to have more importance on him fulfilling his role.
Yeah. I think that's my answer, and I wanted to hear your thoughts first. I don't feel strongly against you, and there were concerns with Kugel even beyond just what his archetype is on the court, right? Like he's a guy
Yeah,
who seemed unhappy at Florida, and that seemed to have a dangerous presence on that locker room, and you don't want to
yeah,
mess with that, especially after the way the McCullough shit went down. You just want a room full of happy guys.
yeah.
With that said, I think Kugel is still supremely talented. Kugel reminds me of Quentin Grimes in the way his career has gone, where it's like, Grimes played 1 year at Kansas and it was good. It wasn't great, and then 2 years later he's on Houston in a Final Four
Mm-hmm.
superstar. And I think that could still happen. Probably not where he ended up, but I was hoping if you pair him with Bill Self and his trajectory of taking
Yeah,
talent wings, there was that level of play potentially for Kugel. I'm always going to trust Bill Self, but if you're just telling me on paper, do I like the class more if Shaquille Moore is Riley Kugel? Yeah, I do. I would have bought that and figured that Bill Self finds a way. But hey, you settled for the number one class in the country. Oh well. Let's go player by player. We'll start with Noah Shelby, who comes from Rice. I believe, is he taking a walk-on season for Kansas this year?
he's taking a walk on season if I remember correctly. Let me I'll double check with Jim Root's roster sheet here, which can't recommend enough. Highly recommend. It's worth the $10. He's taking a walk on, and I believe he's redshirting.
Oh, then okay. Then we don't need to do a role conversation, but any quick thoughts on who Noah Shelby is as a player? He was a role player for Rice, only 11 minutes a game. Man, even if we're doing the Kugel thing, couldn't you have just kept Kugel on scholarship and not done this Noah
I
Shelby?
think Shelby is getting a head start on a coaching career.
Ah,
This is a move you'll see guys do who later in their careers where like he's a role player at Rice. I don't think he's transferring to Kansas to expect to start and play a major role for Kansas at any point in the next 2 seasons, but can learn from himself for 2 years, and that makes you more attractive as a potential graduate assistant, whether at Kansas or somewhere else in two
yeah,
years.
that is cool. Shout out to Bill
Yeah,
Self. I like that move.
yeah.
All right, moving up the list. Next up, we're going in order of points per game from last year, so this may be a little it's a lot backwards, I think, in terms of impact as we get higher up the list. But Shaquille Moore is next, 7.9 points a game at Mississippi State, 23 minutes. I think, as you alluded to, there's a lot of guys who can score the basketball on this team. Shaquille Moore is one of the guys who will give you things that aren't just scoring the basketball on this team, but he did shoot 36% from three, 47% from the floor, so he was pretty efficient. He's 6'1", kind of undersized. He's going to have to play in the backcourt. But what's
Yep.
his role and what do you make of his game?
He's a role player, sixth or seventh man, depending on probably the day and how you stack up him and Zeke Mayo. He was brought to this team late in the cycle, as we talked about, but he was brought in to be a tough nosed defender, bring some of that toughness and physicality to the backcourt, provide some scoring off the bench. But at this point in his career, it's clear he's not going to be like a true dominant offensive weapon. I thought that may be the case for him. Back when he was at NC State first freshman season, he showed some flashes of being really, really good. Went to Mississippi State, was a very good player, Mississippi State, but kind of stagnated offensively, and the lack of shooting played a big part in that. You did mention he shot 36% in this past season. That was the best of his career. I think you're probably going to get somewhere around a 35% 3-point shooter, but somebody who is really relentless attacking the basket, knows how to get to the foul line, is going to play good defense for what like Kansas needs, because Kansas brought in a number of good shooters and scorers who we're going to get to with the rest of this class. He's going to be productive with the ball in his hands, but doesn't need it, and is more of a glue guy, 5th-year leader than I think any of the other guys that were brought in. I think that's very important to a successful Kansas team.
Yeah, just a vet. That's what I would
Yeah.
say. Like to be honest with you, from watching the film and just the profile, I don't think there's a ton that Shaquille Moore is going to be used for in this group because I believe the guys ahead of him are going to be able to do some of the things people think they might not be able to. Like I think
Mhm.
AJ Storr can end up being an impact defender on this team. I like Rylan Griffin defensively a lot. Like
Yep.
I don't know that we're gonna be seeking out backcourt role player defense stuff if the starters are capable of doing what I think they are. So for that reason, I'm actually gonna say his role ends up being a non-factor on this team, and that might seem a little harsh, but I'm sure he'll get opportunities early. I'm sure he'll get opportunities in the season too. And his presence matters because you want age, you want old dudes who do winning things. Shaquille Moore does that. He's going to help the locker room in a huge way. I don't think he's going to help the court. And if it goes well, with all due respect, I think Zeke Mayo and Riquise Passmore both need big minutes on this team. So now you're looking at a rotation of Harris, Griffin, Storr, Mayo, Passmore. If those guys hit, to me, you're just not playing Shaquille Moore. But that's more about how high I am on the other five than it is
Mhm.
about anything Shaquille Moore can or cannot do. Next on the list, Rylan Griffin, 11 points a game in 26 minutes for an Alabama team that made a Final Four last season. A great shooter,
Yep.
39% from three, a very, very high volume guy. I think this is your prototypical 3-and-D wing. And there
Yep.
are people much smarter than me that say he's one of the most impactful defenders in the country. What do you think he'll be for Kansas?
He's going to be the 3-and-D guy. He's going to be the starter, probably at the 3, and he's going to be the 3-and-D guy. I would not be surprised if he replicated his numbers from Alabama last season. Maybe a slight uptick, but he's going to be, I think, the 3rd or 4th offensive option, depending on the game. I think he's going to be relied on the space of the court and play good defense on the wing. I don't know how they're going to use him offensively more than a shooter, because he is more than just a shooter. But that's it. That's his strongest selling point, is his shooting. So I'm interested to see how Bill Self works that. But having him as an option to float around the perimeter with Dwan Harris playmaking for others, and with AJ Storr attacking the basket, I do think there's potential for him to be one of the nation's very best shooters this year.
This was one of the ones that I think you just tip your cap to Bill Self. Like, what a poach job from him.
Yeah.
Take a team and a program that was in the Final Four, has all the momentum in the world, is going to return Mark Sears. And, like, for a guy who wants to shoot a bunch of threes, was there a better system in college basketball for Rylan Griffin than the one he left at Alabama? Like, he had
No, but if you pay attention to the Alabama videos we've done on this site, they're probably going to go like 12 deep and have to cut people from that rotation who deserve minutes anyway.
For sure. Yeah, this is why they're the two best teams in the country. But
Yeah.
I just when you're trying to differentiate between Kansas and Alabama, and I know a lot of people are putting them as 1A and 1B, I consistently make the point, well, one of them just poached a starter from the other one. Like that is what happened here. Rylan Griffin was
Yep.
really important to Alabama, and now he is really important to Kansas because Bill Self said so. He said, "Give me
Yep.
that." And he's the only guy in the sport who's capable of doing something like that. I love Rylan Griffin's game. I love it individually. I think he is probably the best shooter on this team. I think he could not have picked a better situation roster wise for himself to have his stuff be shown.
Mhm.
And the thing I like most, and I know this from experience, Rylan Griffin is the best teammate for Hunter Dickinson since Hunter Dickinson's freshman year. Like, and I think people probably don't care or think, like, why does Greg care so much about this? I care about this because when Hunter Dickinson was surrounded with pieces that make sense for him, he was unstoppable. as a true
Mhm.
freshman in the Big Ten that included Luka Garza and Zach Edey. And like Dickinson was better than them at times, even in head to head moments, because he had Isaiah Livers around him. And he had some guys who are just role player good fits. And then he tried to make it work for 2 seasons at Michigan. It didn't. He went to Kansas, and I yelled about it all last offseason. He went to a team with a point guard who doesn't want to shoot the ball, a four who can't shoot, and another spot that was a black hole last year. Like, with all due respect, Kansas roster made no sense for Hunter last year. And Bill Self figured that out. And Rylan Griffin is the perfect fix for that. Like, his presence on the floor is going to make Dickinson so much better. It's why I'm gassing up Hunter Dickinson as a preseason National Player of the Year. Like, I think he's going to be the best player in college basketball this year, and Griffin will have a huge part in helping him do that. Next on the list, AJ Storr, another guy ripped out of the Big Ten, 16.8 points last season for Wisconsin. He started his career at St. John's. This guy feels right in line with all the other Kansas star wings, right? It seems like every
Yep.
year there's a small forward who's one of the best in the country, and I think people are going to expect AJ Storr to be that.
Yeah, because he was that at Wisconsin for the first 3.5 months of the season before he kind of decided he was going to transfer after the season. And there was a noticeable dip in his production at a certain point where I think you started to see he realized he wasn't going to be back there next season, and he kind of led on to that too. But yeah, he's going to be a star for this team. I think him and Dickinson are your two stars. He's the one on the perimeter. Dickinson's the one on the inside. He can shoot the three. He's better attacking the basket, better with his pull up game. He is going to be, if not this team's leading scorer, it's going to be Hunter Dickinson, and then he'll be the second leading scorer. But he's going to average 16 and 19 points per game, be a potential American candidate, be a Big 12 Player of the Year candidate. Everything he did at Wisconsin, I think, is going to get easier too, because the system, I think, is going to afford him more opportunities. I fully expect him to be a highly productive, more efficient player than he was last season.
Yep. Yeah, it should happen. Efficiency is the key because at Wisconsin, and I would even say like in his good moments at St. John's, the whole plan for AJ Storr has just been like volume, volume, volume. Go
Yeah.
use every possession and figure it out. That's never going to happen at Kansas. And I think you can make an argument there's a fork in the road. One path is that's perfect for AJ Storr because he's going to look better and more efficient with a point guard who uses possessions and sets him up and a big man who's a star. The other path is it doesn't look great because AJ Starr is a guy who can only be a volume guy. I think there is a world where that happens. We need to see it. If it wasn't Bill Self in charge of this team with his track record with this position, I would be a lot more concerned about it because AJ Storr really was a problem for Wisconsin down the stretch of last season. Like
Yep.
he still had loud good moments, but he kind of shot them to losses. And there was just some stuff, guys who like are out there to get their points and kind of take the rest of the game off. That was AJ Storr to me at times last year. Like, he was there to score and do nothing else. Now, on this team, I think he'll be asked to do that. I don't think they're going to be asking him to do much other than score and defend. He may be the best wing athlete in the country. Like you're going to see some flashes of Terrence Shannon in the way he can fly up and get out and transition here. Every program in the country wanted him. I think the high ceiling for Storr here is leading scorer on this team and All American, and I think the
Yep.
low floor is Rylan Griffin's a better wing than him. Like there's a wide range of outcomes. There might be he might be the most volatile player on Kansas, but he's damn talented, man. He's probably the most
Yeah,
talented player on the team.
he is.
Final name.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was going to say one thing with the volume too. It is a concern. I do think though, either Bill Self wants that or wouldn't have gone and gotten him. I also think AJ Storr does not go to Kansas if he expects to take 25 shots a game.
The only thing
I think that's fleshed out in the recruiting process.
my counterpoint to you on that point is AJ Storr was going where the highest check was. And
Yes.
that was made real clear from early in his recruitment. So I think like and honestly that's part of my concern here. I'm glad we just got to this point. There are some guys who like take into consideration their teammates and fit and role and how am I going to be used, because I care about basketball. And then there are some guys who have played for 9 different schools in 8 years that go where the money goes. That
Yes.
he has a
Self
track record of
self is
that before college too.
Self is not going to pony that money up though if he doesn't have a plan. This is me trusting Bill Self as part of that too.
What happened with Kevin McCullough last year?
What other options did Bill Self have?
I'm just saying we have seen it go south. Is all I'm
There's a
saying.
reason AJ Storr is not number one on our list because he didn't average the most points per game of anybody last year. I think there are other options Bill
Yeah,
Self can go to in a pinch that were not available last season.
you are right. I just like in the world where this goes poorly, I think it can go really poorly. Now, Kansas is still going to be great if it goes poorly because everybody else is really good, as you said. But I just
We're
individual projections are there's a wide range of outcomes for AJ Storr.
If it goes poorly, Bill Self has kicked people off the team midseason before.
You're right. You're right. That's not going to happen, Kansas fans. But
It's not. No,
I
AJ
want
Storr
people
is going
to.
to be awesome. AJ Storr is going to be awesome, but it has happened before.
Final name on this list is Zeke Mayo. 18.8 points a game, a 6'4" guard from South Dakota State. I mean, very good player. South Dakota State has had some very good individual offensive players come through that program. He shot 39% from three last season. This is a guy who could reasonably start at the two. This is a guy who could play some backup point guard minutes behind DeJuan Harris. This is a guy who could purely come off the bench all year. What do you think his role will be for this Kansas team?
I think his role will be as a 6-man role player. I think that's where he pencils in, unless the efficiency and production translates. I think it's easy to pencil him as a 6-man right now because the DeJuan Harris, AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, we know what all 5 of those guys are, and we know what all 5 of those guys are at a power conference level. Zeke Mayo, we know he's a very good player for South Dakota State playing in the Summit League. We do not know if he can be that impactful and effective playing in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there is a difference there. I think we pencil him as a 6-man because his game, we know he's going to find ways to score and be productive. I think it's more likely he leads a second unit than overtakes one of those 5 in the starting lineup. At the same time, I think the potential is there for it, particularly if things go wrong with AJ Storr or Bill Self just decides he doesn't want KJ Adams and Hunter Dickinson playing next to each other as much anymore. But I think the most likely outcome here is that he's a 6-man in charge of basically ensuring there is no drop off when one of those 5 comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a luxury. Like he's the fail safe. And if he's great, then you make some tweaks to things. But if he's not great, then he can just settle in and be a great 6-man, as you said. I do feel like in the process of discussing this Kansas team and this class since it's signed, Zeke has kind of been looked over or forgotten. And I get why, because AJ Storr and Rylan Griffin are great. But like you go check like National Player of the Year odds on DraftKings, like Zeke Mayo is very high. He's like in the top 20 in the country. And I don't think anybody in college basketball views him even close to that. So there's probably a middle ground. Like that might be one where college basketball people are right. And that's insane. But when he signed with Kansas, I was very much like, oh, they just got a star. Like, this is going to be great. And then they got some more talented high major pedigree guys. And it was like, oh, who cares about Zeke Mayo anymore? I do think there's a world where he's the best guard on this team. I really do.
There's a world there. Yeah.
It could happen. And again, he's a guy that, like, as much as I think DeJuan can fit with anybody, when I'm trying to build around Hunter, who I think is my best player, Zeke Mayo is like the perfect guard I want around Hunter. So I think he's going to play a ton of minutes, whether he starts or comes off the bench. The lineup that excites me the most on this team would be going small with Hunter and then 4 guards. Like put Rylan Griffin at the 4, AJ Storr at the 3, Zeke Mayo at the 2. You got so much shooting around DeJuan Harris and Hunter. It would be really incredible to watch. But yeah, it's like if Storr loses his mind or DeJuan is struggling or anything happens here, Zeke Mayo becomes a starter. And if not, he's a great 6th man. It's a luxury to have.
Okay. It's going to be fun to see how Bill Self navigates that in particular, because their best lineup probably is with Zeke Mayo, AJ Storr, and Rylan Griffin all on the court together with Hunter Dickinson.
Yep.
And that means you're picking between DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams, who are both like prototypical Bill Self 4-year starters on a championship team kind of players. And
Right.
so I'm interested to see how Bill Self handles that. Does he default to those kind of program guys or go with as much talent as possible? I'm
Yeah.
very intrigued. Basketball nerd me is very intrigued to see how what Bill Self does there.
Great point. It's a team with 6 starters. That's what it feels
Yeah.
like. And they might be the only team in the country that feels that way. Couple superlative questions for you. At the end of the season, who is the best player from this transfer class?
I think the best player is AJ Store. I think the most valuable is Rylan Griffin.
It's a good distinction there. Um, that toss up and what you just laid out feels very back to the freshman year for Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Livers, Franz Wagner.
Yeah.
It was like who's better, and they're
Yeah.
identical. I would say Franz was probably better, but Isaiah was more valuable. Um, I think that's exactly how this plays out. Store's the best player, but maybe Store does or Griffin does better things in the intangible ways. Who's the player that improves the most from this class by the end of the year?
I think it's probably Zeke Mayo, and I've defaulted on a lot of these to the mid-major guys who transfer up. I think there's a learning curve there, but I think by the end of the year, Zeke Mayo will make the adjustment and be a very, very impactful offensive force for this team.
I like that. I'm going to say Rylan Griffin. And part of that is just improvement over what he was last year, like where he is today versus the end of the year. I think
Mhm.
Rylan Griffin's going to score more. I think we're going to see the production go up, whereas I think Stores is going to come backwards a little bit from what it was at
Yeah.
Wisconsin. I see him as a superstar role player that just gets better and better over time. And final question, give me a hot take for the Kansas transfer class.
I think there will be some drama with one of them and Hunter Dickinson at some point during the season. It's probably
Ooh,
AJ Store.
ooh. We have not discussed that part of this, even though we did some store stuff. There
Yeah.
are real things to be concerned about with those two in a locker room together, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's a note you have to say out loud. I still think Hunter's going to be fine because when Hunter's been on great basketball teams, he's been fine. The issues with Hunter have become a thing when there's bad basketball. To me, last year
Right.
Hunter wasn't an issue in the locker room. He was holding Kevin McCullough accountable. That's what
Yeah.
happened. And as long as Kansas is winning games this year, I don't think you're going to hear a peep from Hunter. If they're not, and AJ Store's messing shit up, you probably will. And we'll see how it goes.
I think there's going to be like a late December, early January spat, as happens at times with Kansas, and Bill Self has dealt with this before. And they've moved on successfully within a matter of weeks. Like I expect there to be some report that has to be addressed, but I do think things will be fine. To me, this is more a take of Kansas in general, so I apologize for diverting a little bit.
Oh, you're good.
You remember the scene? You've seen the movie The Town?
Yes. Good movie.
There's a scene where John Hamm is like realized that this the gang is who he's going after. That like this is a job done by them, the professionals, and that they're high level. And he has a line in there where he's like, "This is the not fucking around crew." I think both from Bill Self's perspective and the collective players, they all went into this saying like, "This is the not fucking around crew. Like we are winning championships in our career." Bill Self's like, "We're winning a championship this season." To me, there's a collective like everybody's decision was made with the team in mind. Maybe AJ Store because he got the check, but there are some of you go to Kansas for this. And when a team like Kansas and a coach like Bill Self goes out with such intent to put this group together, there's almost like a statement being made of like we are driving towards this one singular national championship goal and get on the bus. Like
Yeah.
to me, this is the not fucking around crew. So while there may very much be a spat between AJ Store and Hunter Dickinson somewhere along the line, I think there is enough buy-in from everybody to get past it quickly and it be a footnote at the end of the season.
Yeah. I love that angle. I think it's a great read from you. Okay. My hot take, I'll go more player specific here. I think Zeke Mayo is a starter at the end of this season. And I think there's a couple paths we already alluded to. One of them I think is like Rylan Griffin becomes sixth man extraordinaire. Like they use
Yeah.
him as the pure shooter, play him 30 minutes, but give Zeke Mayo the starting nod. The second one I think is a little more diabolical. It's that Zeke Mayo is just a better player than DeJuan Harris. I think that is a possible outcome here, and Kansas fans will fight me to the death on that. But I mean, imagine there's a world where Zeke
Yeah,
Mayo's just one of the best guards in the country. Um,
yeah,
if he is, I think Bill Self is cutthroat enough to make that move if needed, and we'll keep an eye on it as it goes. Kansas, number one team in the country for a reason, number one transfer class in the country for a reason. This concludes our top 20 transfer series. You can see all those videos up on the channel right now of this exact same setup. We broke down every single class in the top 20. Coming up next on the Sleepers channel is our top 20 recruiting classes. Similar structure, same thing. We ranked the top 20. I believe starting tomorrow, once this video is out, we will have the recruiting class videos dropping. Thank you to Brian Ralph and Riley Davis and Carter Elliott for doing this with me. And stay tuned for more. Cart, you know what I love about you?
That I'm handsome?
You're reliable. I can count on you. You know, honestly, you remind me of Aaron Henry a little bit. Remember when, like, you know, their back was against the wall, nothing was going right, and man just showed up every day. He didn't make excuses. There were no problems, there were just solutions.
Sounds like me.
That's you. And it also reminds me of Duncan Mechanical Solutions, because if you're looking for quality furnace repair, look no further than the heating and air experts that you can trust. Comfort and quality are their standard. They're an HVAC company that serves Northeast Indiana and Southern Michigan, whether it's heating and air conditioning, plumbing, kitchen and bath remodeling, or emergency services when you need them most. Duncan Mechanical Solutions has reliable service that you can count on. Cart, remember when your basement almost exploded?
I remember when my basement almost exploded. I remember when my furnace itself was acting funny. I remember when my AC was acting funny. I wish I had Duncan in my back pocket. I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been anywhere in northern Indiana or southern Michigan that hasn't been perfectly cool or perfectly warm, depending on when the day called for. And that's because of Duncan Mechanical Solutions. They are the presenting sponsor for the month of July. Shout out to Duncan Mechanical Solutions. Go to duncanmechanicalsolutions.com to learn more.